So you've been training for a while. You spend time day in and out with these really great people, and maybe one in particular you start to develop feelings for. So, should you date them? Hey, what's up? I'm Ken. This is kenfuTV, and each week I release videos in the martial arts, philosophy, technique, training, that sort of thing. And if that's the sort of thing you're into, make sure to subscribe, like this video if it has value for you, and let's talk about relationships today. And specifically relationships on the mat, and should you date inside the dojo? Now, it's important to start off with the idea that there's a lot of different scenarios that can create these situations. So not every situation is equal. In fact, I would argue that every situation is very unique. So let's maybe start by breaking down the most common combinations of things. So either you train and you find somebody that you're attracted to and you develop feelings for, or the correlating combination where you train and somebody develops feelings for you. Naturally, this likely leads to people developing feelings for each other. There's also the situation where you come into this, you start the martial arts with a significant other, somebody in your life that you have feelings for. And lastly, the situation where your significant other decides that they want to start training. You've been training for a while, and they've decided to start training with you. Each of these have their own components to them, their own context to what makes them complicated. But there is an overarching complication to all of it, which is that when you mix relationship, when you mix those kinds of feelings, they become hard to separate on the mat. So when you're training hard and being serious, those things can be misinterpreted as being upset with you or things like that. Here's what I know. Here's the real talk, the thing that I've seen over the years, the things that I've gone through myself. These relationships on the mat don't always last. In fact, I'd say most of them don't last. And so you have to spend time thinking about, what does this look like if it doesn't last? A lot of times what it means is that one of you, generally one of you, not usually both, but it could be, is going to stop training. Going to go find a new place to train. Maybe you don't stop training in general, you go find somewhere else to train, but you're not going to be training with each other anymore. In some cases, you might have the situation where there's different classes and you can just pick up a different time and you guys just don't come to the same class at the same time, so you're not on the mat together. Sometimes it means you're just out in general, or they're out in general. And I don't want to discount the fact that sometimes it means life goes on. You both are really mature about it, you keep training, and it's not too difficult for either of you. Maybe it was a very mutual thing that happened naturally, and you're able to continue to train without having to feel like you don't want to be around each other. And sometimes that means time. You need time away from each other before you can be back together again. These are difficult situations. If you choose to leave, well, suddenly you're having to find a new place to train. You're not out the effort and experience that you've gained, because that sticks with you, period. So you haven't lost that, but you have lost future potential. If you're the one that gets to stay, you get to be the one who continues to train while somebody else doesn't get to, while their potential is lost in that space, in that dojo. You're gonna have people around you on the mat, fellow students, instructors, and now suddenly they don't have this person around anymore. They might resent you for that. Owners of the dojo are going to take a financial hit from the fact that this person is no longer coming in anymore. So it's really hard to determine how this will shake out, and it's probably not going to shake out fairly for everyone involved. So does that mean you shouldn't do it? I'm not going to say that. If the thing is, if you develop feelings for somebody doing something that you love and you are both passionate about, well, it seems like a really good thing, doesn't it? Doesn't mean it's going to work. I'm not going to pitch that that's the best place to find somebody, but it does mean that this might be the one. This might be the person, right? I mean, you can't ignore the fact that somebody who loves the things that you do may also love you, and you might love them, and it might just be really awesome. There is a flip side to that. Sometimes the things that we're most passionate about are the things that we need to not contaminate, for lack of maybe a better word. But if you have that thing, you got your day-to-day life, you got your job you go do, you got your things you go do, you got your time you spend with family. Well, sometimes that means that stuff like the dojo is your time away, that space that's for you. And if you start dating inside the dojo, then suddenly that space isn't exactly yours anymore. It's not your breath that you take while getting away from everybody. You're now not spending that time away from each other. It can be really positive, it can be really negative. It kind of depends on the relationship and how that works. Sometimes it can feel really confining. I don't say any of these things to persuade you or dissuade you from relationships on the mat. Truly, that comes down to you, comes down to the person that you think of when I talk about this, and it comes down to the actual feel of the gym and how that goes. Some places may just have a strict policy that just doesn't happen, and you've got to consider that too. Not every place is going to be open to allowing that for that same reason, right? If it doesn't go right, then suddenly somebody's leaving, and who left? Was it somebody that's been there for 10 years and has put a lot of effort in, and then somebody came in for a couple of years, you guys dated, and then the person who's been here 10 years suddenly is gone? That instructor's going, whoa, I've invested a lot of time into this person. Or the opposite, it's the person who's only been there a couple of years, and now this person's potential isn't there. There's a lot of things there. So school owners and gym owners and coaches and all that may go, it's not happening, you're not doing it. I mean, newsflash. It'll still happen. They just will try not to tell you. So I personally don't adopt the policy of don't do it. I just do adopt the policy of we're going to talk about it and we're going to have a conversation, because it's important to realize the impact of it. Everything has impact. And if we're not spending time measuring that impact, then we could be setting ourselves up for trouble that we could have avoided. But it's not all doom and gloom. Let's talk about positive situations. So I've been in situations where I've ended up having feelings for somebody that I trained with. In fact, the person that I originally started training with, years later, we ended up dating for a while. And then we didn't end up dating. And I still train, she doesn't still train. So I've got a perspective on that. But I also train with my fiance now, years later. And that one came about differently. That came about, I was training all the time. She was going to school and doing all that, didn't train or have interest in training. And with that came its own complications. She was really busy with her stuff. I was really busy at the dojo. That put pressure on the relationship by itself. So later we decided she wanted to try it after she got out of school. And so she started training. And so the relationship didn't start on the mat. So the relationship was different. So having been in both of those places, I can definitely say a relationship that starts outside and comes in is a lot easier to maintain than one that starts on the mat. Now, it is not without its own complications. Here's an important thing, something that I want everyone to hear, even if you don't train together, even if you train in different places, or only one of you trains. And I'm not talking about on the mat, I'm talking about when you're at home or wherever. When you train with your significant other, it's different. It's a different feeling. Things are taken differently. They feel different. Especially you guys, you're gonna feel like there's nothing wrong with it. We'll just do this. It's just normal. We'll just go. We maybe can compartmentalize a little better sometimes. And so it's easy to just go, well, we're doing this now and we're not doing that now. That's not the same for everybody who does that, right? Women in particular don't necessarily separate those two things, and it's all one thing, and they see that, and that's a beautiful thing that they see all of this all the time together. Makes it complicated for them or anybody who feels this way, right? Doesn't have to be a woman. Guys can do this too. It's just propensities. I haven't seen it as much one way versus the other, but here's what I mean. There's pressure. Especially guys don't like to lose. They like to be the winner. So things that I've seen a lot is women who come train, work hard, they go home to their husband, their boyfriend, whoever, and they want to practice their technique and show what they learned, and they're excited and they're feeling empowered and their confidence is blooming. And then the guy does what I've seen happen 1,000 times. And I'm saying the girl and the guy, this is not specific to that, but it's what I've seen the most. So then the guy starts working with him and starts resisting, starts making it difficult, or what if I did this, and grabs him in a certain way, or throws a lot of force into it, or holds really tight. And maybe they just started learning this technique and they haven't figured out how to use it or employ it in situations with much greater resistance. You just come up with ways, well, that wouldn't work because of this or that, or I would just do this. And here's what you're really doing in that moment. What you're really doing is crushing the confidence that they've built. You're taking what they came back feeling empowered and excited to continue to learn and continue to grow and continue to get to the point that you're probably trying to make over the time that it takes to make it. And instead you crush it. You make it just a little bit too hard, or you make it a lot too hard, and you overwhelm them. You make them feel small. You make them feel diminished. You take the wind out of their confidence, and then suddenly it's just crushed. I've seen this a lot of ways. Parents do it to their kids, they don't realize. Siblings do it to each other, older siblings to younger siblings, significant others doing it to their significant other. This is a terrible thing. So usually I'll tell people, especially women who come in from like a self-defense perspective or things like that, where possibly they've had bad situations in the past and they've got boyfriend or whatever, and maybe some of that with ex-boyfriends or something was part of the problem. And so I tell them, hey, they're like, I'm gonna go show this to my boyfriend, we can practice this. And I said, maybe you don't, find a friend to train with, because the last thing you want is that situation where that person steals that confidence from you, where they take that away. Or in the case of somebody abusive, if you haven't necessarily broken the cycle and maybe you've ended up with somebody else, but that somebody else still turns out to be a dirtbag. And there's also the potential of you've shown them what you're capable of. I don't know, there's a lot of, that's probably a totally different talk, a totally different video, different context. Because the way that can shape out, there's feelings about, well, maybe you should trust your partner, or maybe you should not trust your partner, and we're gonna get into that. So that's a totally different topic. If that's something we should talk about, then you can drop that down below. But the main thing is you can totally undermine everything this person has worked through and worked on and tried to build for themselves in just a moment, in just a simple moment of grabbing them really tightly or doing something that makes it to where they can't succeed. And yeah, they should be able to deal with it in that situation. But eventually, you got to start somewhere. So maybe technique's not handling that yet. And maybe that's not the right technique in that situation, or maybe that's not the right principle that needs to be used for that. So that's a really, really bad negative thing that I see all the time when two people in a relationship, like I said, that can be significant others, that can be siblings, that can be parental to children kind of thing. Either way, when there's that relationship and you test that, you create a situation where they can't win, you can absolutely undermine everything they've worked on like that. And they might not come back from it. They might quit. And I've seen it happen. They feel like it doesn't work and they stop. And instead of realizing that they just needed to keep working and learning more, they just don't anymore. They just don't go. They feel like it doesn't work. They feel like they're not capable, they're not strong enough, and instead they feel inferior and they feel weak. And why would anybody want anyone to feel that way? And I'm willing to bet that anybody who's done that to somebody in that situation, most of the time, that was the last thing that they wanted that person to feel, but it is the first thing that person has felt. So just be careful. If you are that other person and somebody's wanting to show you what they learned or something like that, keep that in mind. Keep in mind that a little resistance or something that helps them see it is one thing. Too much resistance and crushing what they have is totally another. So instead, work with them. Be excited for them to show you, even if you would do it a different way, even if you can do it better because you've done it longer, or even because of, I don't know, whatever. Try not to steal things from each other, right? If somebody's excited, maybe let this time be for them and let them be excited. And be excited when you're on the mat. It's very infrequent, well, nigh impossible, for two people in a relationship to stay evenly ranked the whole way through the training. And that's training. Everybody plateaus and has their peaks and valleys at different times. And so even if you started together, there's going to be a time when one person moves, and there might be a time where this person leaps up, and it's just moving around because we're all different, and we train differently, and we hit different plateaus, and these different challenges and things to overcome take different amounts of time. So having rank discrepancy between the two of you can be a lot of stress. And especially, and there's probably 1,000 things to talk about, especially an instructor to a student situation. And I'm not saying that those are all bad. It sounds bad, a student and an instructor. But for example, my fiance is a student and I'm an instructor. She started after I was an instructor. So that's not something that started because of it. It's something that just was. So it doesn't have to be a negative thing, but it does have the same pressures that I'm talking about, where sometimes those lines between that comfort of taking instruction from somebody versus taking orders from somebody and the dynamics of the relationship are difficult to manage. And that's just because of that difficulty of separating what somebody feels in that moment and that sort of thing. Because of the fact that rank will move around and things will change, and one of you will be the superior and one of you will be the inferior, and that's normal to happen. You have to know that it's going to be part of that relationship, and it's going to take work. It's not something that you can go, oh, well, that just is, and then it's fine. It will take work. It will take effort. And it also might not work. I have a really great relationship with my fiance, and we've gone through a lot of this, and we've worked through a lot of this. We've had a lot of conversations, and we've fought through a lot of this because it's not always easy. And some simple things I can tell you is that you're going to find times that you work really well together. And sometimes you're going to find times where you can communicate better because of that relationship and that understanding with each other. You're also going to find barriers where there's certain things that you just can't do for each other because you can't push people in a certain way and not have that feel personal. And so having somebody else, I was really lucky that my instructor was around to be her instructor so that it wasn't me being her instructor. I was still in the hierarchy. I was still her instructor, but it wasn't my job. He took on that role, and that allowed, and he knew it. He told me, he said, there's going to be things that you're not going to be able to teach her. And so I will. The same thing happens with siblings. There's going to be times when you working together is not going to be a good situation. You're going to challenge each other in different ways. You're going to fight over things that were happening outside of the dojo, but because of that, you throw each other a little harder, or you hit a little harder, and things escalate. So there's got to be separation, and it's good to split that stuff up as much as you can. Even on the mat, even if it just means, okay, you go work with this person, you go work with that person, and you don't spend a lot of time working with each other, that's okay, because it's probably for the best. Lastly, the thing to consider is there are certain things that you don't want to introduce into your relationship. So for example, just think of something simple like a choke defense or something like that. As the significant other, connecting that feeling of being choked or something like that to that relationship, even if that it was on the mat and it was supposed to be separate, doesn't mean that it won't become connected. It might scare that person, that might stay connected, and if things happen later, like there's a lot of different ways that could manifest. There are certain things that invade a personal bubble that are going to be hard to overcome off the mat. So just be aware of it. So this was a long way to say you're really going to have to feel it out. You're really going to have to make that assessment. And I hope that if you watched this video, hell, if you're thinking about it, maybe watch it together and talk about it. I hope that you talk about it. I hope that you look at it honestly and you communicate with each other and you start off with good communication. Because without that, I promise it will fail, because it'll be too hard for it to just fix itself and be magical. It's not that. It's not magic. It's work. It can be really, really rewarding work. It can build some amazing relationships that connect things in a really cool way, and you can share a passion together. But it's not always sunshine, and it takes work. It takes communication. But it might be worth it. That's it for today. If you like this video, if you like this channel, you want to subscribe, you can hit that right here. You can see a playlist of videos like this one right here, and a couple more videos that you might like right here. I'm Ken. This is kenfuTV. I'll catch you in the next one.